Good morning, Joe Wimberg, Bluebird Semaphore. And I'm redoing something that I did yesterday because I didn't like it. Too many rants. And rants are not history. But I'm going to cover the same three topics. There's one on the Paracas people, Peru. Another is a return to why the war in the Pacific became the war in the Pacific. And the third is a little musical stuff. So anyway, we'll start with the Paracas. A couple of months ago, my wife came to me and said, "Do you want to subscribe to Archaeology magazine?" And I said no, which is crazy because I love archaeology and I have for 50 years and more. Not when I was very young, 10 or 12, but starting to get into young adulthood, I loved archaeology since forever, right? But I said no, and I think that's just to be contrary. The wife says one thing, the husband says the other. But anyway, she did subscribe. And I was looking into them, and 2 issues back had an article on the Paracas Peninsula, where archaeologists are doing digs right now. So I thought to put the synopsis of that on this Bluebird thing, and that's what I'm doing now. Actually, what I'm doing now is talking into a cell phone. But so the article was extremely interesting, and they're currently doing digs in or on the Paracas Peninsula, which is essentially a peninsula in the shape of a hammerhead with half a handle and the head being out in the water, the handle in the water out to the head. It's a very striking look for a peninsula. You don't see too many peninsulas like that. To recapture the ideas that I had in reading the article, I thought to go back and read the article, which of course I can't find that magazine. So I went to the ever untrustworthy internet, and sure enough, all I got was like a sliver of information. And not only that, their date for these folks was not consistent with what I read in the Archaeology magazine. And of course, who am I going to come down on? Which side am I going to trust? Of course, the Archaeology Museum, because first of all, it's pretty contemporary. Who knows when the article on the internet was written and posted? Who knows? I mean, you could find out, but to me, the inconsistency is the thing. The internet is not reliable. You really can't say, "Oh, this is exactly what's going on. I just read it on the internet." No, you really can't. You can get some feel for a subject, but that's about it. You can't really trust it. Scanty information. But the article went in depth that the dig is going on in the Paracas Peninsula, but it concerns itself more with pre-Paracas people, really old. And if memory serves me, their date 3000 BC for these folks, the pre-Paracas, was in that article. Absolutely sure 2000 was talked about. But on the internet, all they talked about was 800 to 200, the dates for these people. Now, that date may be correct, and the internet date and the article dates, they may both be correct. But it's the way the internet presents things. You don't get to the left or to the right or to the north or to the south of the information. All you get is a little blurb on what you're looking up. You don't get a great deal more. That's what the internet's about. The internet's about giving you a little piece here and there. No great shakes. So, that being said, the dig was mostly about these the dig was about the pre-Paracas people. The article was really more about them. And what they did on this peninsula, they didn't really necessarily live there, but they held their ceremonies there. And they had structures that perhaps they're speculating that these structures were where the folks who were coming to do their ritual ceremonies and their sacrifices and what have you, and even burials, okay? Maybe they stayed in these structures and there's tombs and all of that. And the point that is made is that these people, for the most part, really lived on the mainland off the peninsula, and they were great agriculturalists. And now I'm getting around to the deforestation part. So they were great agriculturalists. Now keep in mind, these are the pre-Paracas people. And that strip of land on the coast of Peru is notorious for being essentially a desert. And no rain falls throughout the year, what have you. But they were able to farm because these rivers coming down from the Andes that would cut across the coastal plain, they would fertilize the banks of these rivers. And, vegetation grew excessively. They just had a tremendous amount of forestation on either sides of these rivers. So what the pre-Paracas people did, of course, is that they deforested so that they could grow their crops. And so now the entire place is a desert now, and it has been for eons. And what strikes me interesting is that when I was reading about the Incas, they would typically describe or start the history of the Incas with some statement that, there used to be a pre-Inca people here, and they lived in this desert, but now nobody could live there anymore, so on and so forth. We don't really know too much about these people. Very cloud and mystery and so on. Well, the archaeologists have lifted that cloud, and now they know a great deal about them. But I had always, up until now, considered that there's nothing I know about whoever was there. And now I know a little bit. So here we are back in 2000, maybe 3000, 2000, and we're deforesting the planet. Well, what's new? They did this all over China. We see reference to deforestation in our own country, the United States. We see it reference to it we said China. We said Russia, and I'm picking out a little stuff. I have to distill it to turn it into deforestation. But certainly, as they pushed out of the fringes of the steppes, they were deforesting the land. And there's some information I got where when they supposedly freed the serfs in Russia and actually made them worse off than they were, the serfs had to come up with arrangements with the oftentimes the original landholders, and those people were interested in they would pay the serfs to lease the land, and then they would turn around and lease the land to developers who would come in and chop all the trees down and put up they call it an office. And this is in the 19th century, early 19th century. You can imagine putting up an office in the middle of the early 19th century. I can't, but that's what they were doing. So we thought we were unique among the peoples of the world in clear cutting for unoccupied strip malls. No, we're not. They were doing it in the early 1900s. So anyway, getting back to the Paracas, so they turned that place into a desert via clear cutting the lands on either side of a river so that they could do agriculture. And I'm going to inject a thought here on all of this, and then I'll get to another part of the deforestation. But the thought I'm going to inject right now is that clearly, and people shy away from this. They tell us that the reason why humans have been so successful, and this is over and over and over, you hear this in the scholarly journals and books, that it's because of their superior intelligence. Well, listen, that may be part of it, but I think the real driving force why humans grew in population numbers and grew excessively is because of their instinct to deforest. Humans see a tree and they want to cut it down. That's clear throughout history. They deforest, more people come in, more crops are sown, the population increases, then they got to move and clear cut some other virgin land. That's been the driving force behind the growth in human population. That's it. Not their superior intelligence. No. It may have something to do with it, their superior intelligence. But they needed to eat. Their bellies were crying out for more food. And they looked around, they saw trees, they cut them down. Doesn't sound very intelligent to me. But to go on, so just yesterday, I picked up a book. All the libraries are closed again, except the wonderful, the great, the magnificent Ocean City, New Jersey Library. They stayed open through this whole freaking mess. Their hours are reasonable. They have a good amount of books. Very lovely people. But everything else down here in Cape May is back to being shut down. So I got this book on everyday life in ancient India, 700 BC to 200 AD. It's by some French woman author who I think has left us by now. I think the book was written in the 50s or 60s. The softback that I have was maybe published in the early 80s. So anyways, I guess she was some sort of scholar. The book was originally written in French, and she's going to talk in depth about their lives. I can get that from just reading 10 pages. But essentially, that civilization matches what I'm talking about as the driving force for human population growth. It was the deforestation. And the reason being, because although there's many portions of India that have become main parts of the overall nation, okay? If you look at a map of India today, you're probably going to see 10 carved up special provinces of India. Of course, back in the time I'm talking about, there weren't too many provinces. There were villages and name places all over the place. But anyway, the invaders came in from basically the Iranian side of the world. And Alexander the Great and Darius III and all these folks, they were all part of this. They were coming in, they were doing their slaughtering or whatever they do, and they moved basically southish and eastish. South and east. That's a very bad word, southist. I just try to make that up. But in one section, they call it I'll just call it the land between the Indus River and the Ganges. I think it's called like the Indus-Gangetic Plain. Well, these are lands that are spread west to east, east to west, south of the Himalayas, south of Nepal, a broad stretch of land. And knowing one thing, that the land south of Nepal, even now, parts of it are a great big jungle, a jungle of forest trees. I know for sure that in order for the populations in the ancient times to grow, these invading armies had to come in with their people in tow and chop down those trees so they could plant their crops and live. And then they would do that over and over and over, and you get essentially deforestation. Now, certainly a great deal of India, except in some higher elevations, is rather dry. was not that all the time. It was more like what we see closer to Nepal, a vast tree jungle, elephants, tigers all over the place. No, the deforestation came, and it's still probably going on, and sure enough, drier conditions, and people had to look elsewhere for their food. Now, although that in and of itself is a significant point, what I instantly saw, maybe not instantly, maybe 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, I recognized that what was going on in India, 700 BC, is going on in the Amazon right now. In other words, nationally led deforestation. Okay? Nationally led. And do we try to do anything about it? No. At least we're pretty sure that back when they were deforesting India, the people had no say in what was going on. Nothing. The king wanted to chop down a forest, he'd chop down a forest, or he'd chop your head off. So that's not the situation today. So the deforestation, although there are world organizations and there are people holding up placards and all that, the deforestation of the Amazon goes on daily. The numbers are staggering. You can't believe that the amount of tropical forest can be removed on a daily basis. You know, they talk about tens of thousands of acres every day. And of course, one of the big reasons for that is that we have these monstrosities in these machines that come in and clear, bang, bang. Back in the old days, you had to chomp a little bit, get an elephant, tie it around the trunk, and pull it down. Well, that took a little time. But not anymore. You could clear a forest as quick as look at it. So the odds are against the forests of the world ever coming out of this alive. The odds are stacked against it. People really don't care. The great majority don't care. As long as they're getting their consumer goods and their bellies are full, they're not going to worry about some rainforest, 7,000 miles away from them. They're not going to. So, and I wanted to make that connection between what happened in India a long time ago and what's going on right now in the Amazon. And of course other places like Borneo and whatever. I always mention Borneo. It's a region that's dear to my heart. The Southeast Asian islands, just spectacular places. So that's, I think, is all I'm going to say about deforestation today, except I'm going to inject one other point, is that a buddy of mine who's very knowledgeable when it comes to trees and plants, extremely. So he told me about some guru that's going around right now promoting a concept of reforesting the globe, global reforesting. And the idea is you get everybody that owns a little piece of land, the quarter-acre lot, in a development, a half-acre lot here and there. Every one of those people to get on board with planting indigenous species of trees, shrubs, perennials, okay, on their lots. Not the whole lot, but maybe 30% of it, okay, or more. When you see you like it, you do more. And they should, if every lot did this, and they did it in a combined effort, where these 30% pieces of indigenous wild forests, like stands of trees and shrubs and perennials, actually touch, then you can actually create a fabric of wildlife, okay, across the globe. And supposedly there's a guru going around talking this up today. So I told my friend when he said it, I said, hey, that was my idea 20 years ago. That's what you should do. That's what I was saying. But I was saying it to myself, And because I never had a bully, what do you call it, bully pulpit. I never had that until this thing came along, where you can talk into a cell phone and somehow through magic, it's up in the internet somewhere and people can read it. Not that people read a lot of my stuff, but some do, you know. Anyway, so that was my idea years ago, and to my credit, I did that. That's right. I'm patting myself on the back. I did that in the development in Toms River, New Jersey, where I used to live. Okay, I let native species reestablish themselves. I planted other appropriate trees in the yard, particularly along the lines, property lines. And it was different in all the other yards there, but I don't think I made it an eyesore. I think it probably was pleasant. And at the time, many of the other lots still had their original trees. Because when they built that development, I think starting in the 50s, maybe the 60s or the 70s, but it was a summer type of community, summer home type of community. So the trees were left. They didn't come in and clear cut like they do everywhere else. But over time, since I've left, and I've returned there once recently, a lot of trees have been cut down, even on the houses that were built 30 years ago. So there's a lot less trees and there's a lot more cars. And whereas at one time I was always pleased to live there because of the amount of native and any sort of vegetation on and around all these lots, you still felt like you were in a pine forest, which is tremendous. But that's not the case anymore. It looks now to me like a great big parking garage. It has been turned to the dark side, but not my lot. My lot still stands out lovely. The people did a lovely job on the house. They whatever you do, you remodel, do it, but it's still a modest looking ranch with lovely trees around it. I mean, the front street is lined. The front property line is lined with trees that now are, realistically, they're probably 30 feet tall. It's wonderful. Anyway, and then I came down here to Cape May County, which was pretty wonderful when I came down here. But their intention is to chop every tree down. So mostly on the east side, where the tourists come to go on their summer vacations. It's all being chopped down for strip malls that can't be filled. So that's what's going on. I'm on the other side of the county. I have a few years, and I brag about it. This entire side of the county, there hasn't been a single new thing built since I'm down here. But what is going on is the individual property owners are cutting down the trees because they hate trees. They hate them. So that's enough about trees and deforestation. Look around you, you'll see evidence of deforestation. You'll see evidence of massive biological dead zones all around us. So the next topic was why did World War II become, why did the war in the Pacific or whatever, why did the war in the Pacific become the war in the Pacific, World War II vintage? And I had gotten away from that for a long time, but I picked up a book the other night that I had started a while back, and it's called Return from the River Kwai. A husband and wife journalist team wrote this. And now we all know the famous movie and book, The Bridge Over the River Kwai. What a movie. Beautiful, but also horrific. However, that never happened. That event never happened. The Japanese never forced the combined British, Australian, American POWs to build a bridge. What the Japs did do is they forced them to build a railroad through Burma. Now, keep in mind, there were rules on the table. POWs, you can't do this sort of thing with POWs. You got to keep them alive, you got to feed them, you got to give them medical attention. Okay? But you can't turn them into forced labor. But these are the Japanese we're talking about. They do whatever they want. Then, now, that's who they are. So, they had forced them to build this railroad. Now the railroad was built, and they said, listen, we'll take them back to Japan. There's a couple of thousand of them. I'll take them back to Japan. They can work in our factories. They can dig in our mines. Okay, great job. Let's go. So they got to march now, 1,000 miles, who knows, from Burma to their embarkation points, which seem to me to be somewhere around Singapore and perhaps somewhere around the Mekong Delta. 2 embarkation points, and they're going on. They're not going on military crafts, although there's military escorts for this convoy, and they're like freighters and tankers that they're going to put them on too. They put all these POWs on 2, and it was probably 8, 10 in the convoy, 4, 6 escorts, and they're heading up the South China coast in the South China Sea, and they get where they're probably a couple of 100 miles below Formosa, quote unquote, Taiwan today, and off that island Hainan, and directly due east of North Vietnam. They're going up. They get that far. They're quite a ways off Manila, but that's just to give you an idea of the line that they're getting to when along comes an American submarine pack, and they spot the convoy, and they're going to set out to torpedo them. Well, one of the skippers of the submarines torpedoes 2 of the ships that have the POWs on, and these are the POWs from that area in the book, the River Kwai, the bridge over the River Kwai, and these are the same POWs who built the railroad through Burma. Of course, an excessively harsh ordeal, but these are the survivors. They're on these 2 ships. They get torpedoed. They're in the water, which gives the Japanese another chance to show how disgusting they are, because they would not rescue any of the Americans, the British, the Australians who were in the water. They would not. Now, other countries always do that. At least I know we do. We've always done that. But not the Japanese, because they're different genetics. They're just different. So they would beat back the people looking to be rescued. They did all these horrible things. But this is the essence of the story right now. On one of the ship, there was a non-Navy officer of high rank, and he was tasked with getting these prisoners of war to Japan. And when he saw the captain of the ship not allowing the survivors in the water to get on a ship, he went ballistic. He said, "You're going to put these POWs on your ship because I'm responsible for them. If I don't get them to Japan, it's going to be my neck. They're going to put the sword of samurai on my neck. You get these people on." And the captain relented and did. Now, he got some on. I think it was a couple of 100, maybe 300. He was able to get that captain to take on. But this is nowhere near the couple of thousand that went in the water. So they were rescued, and we have no idea what happened to them when they got to Japan. It's untrackable. But many, of course, just died in the water. Some did get over to that island, Hainan, or something, off the coast of Vietnam. Big island. Noted for its fish sauce, by the way. It's very prominent supply of fish sauce coming out of that island. And so we know about them, but the bottom line is, from that group, about 300 are accountable. So at the end of the day, the Japanese showed their true colors by not making any attempt to rescue the survivors of those 2 torpedoings. None. Even when it was down to individuals on a raft, they would beat back the Americans who would try to get on their raft. So it wasn't just at the highest levels. It was permeated, that culture, that civilization. Okay? To them, it was them that counted and nobody else. Everybody else we can kill. We have absolute right to kill, slaughter, maim, do whatever we want. As I said in one of my past I think I said it, past world histories is the greatest entertainment was to slice off somebody's head with their artful samurai swords, so perfectly balanced, so perfectly sharpened. You could slice off a head with a glancing blow. That was their source of entertainment. So anyway, that's to me that underscores completely why the war in the Pacific became the war in the Pacific. It was because of the people. That's why, you know, and the need for raw human workforce, the need for a human workforce, human power. The Japs had their eyes on that area, you know, before the war. Dutch Netherlands, East Dutch Indies. That's where they had their eyes on. That's where they're going to get their peeps from. Bring them right up there to China, Japan, so they could make them work until they drop dead, so on and so forth. So we don't applaud the Japanese for doing this. As a matter of fact, we think very unkindly about their behavior that led to the war in the Pacific. And why it became that. And quite frankly, I've covered other ideas about that. In other words, where the people living in the Southeast Asian islands came from. I think I pretty much made it clear that over the millennium, these people that lived in that area came from various places because of a recently read book about genetic distribution. It was something mitochondrial DNA, MDA. Anyway, but they could prove now scientifically that these population centers, small though they be, would pop up somewhere because somewhere else was getting overused, no more ability to expand. So they would pop up somewhere else, intermix genetically, and then pop up somewhere else when they couldn't survive here anymore. Mixing, pop up somewhere else, mixing, and finally going in every direction on the planet. So it became clear to me that the people in the Southeast Asian islands, where did they come from? They came from everywhere. That's all you could say. They came from everywhere. They're us, they're them, okay? They lived there, they're human beings. They weren't the stronger. The Japs were the stronger, and the Japs beat them into submission. That's the end of it. And then not only that, the Europeans weren't up to the task. The Dutch crumbled, the Brits crumbled down there. The United States was too worried about the war in Europe, you know, to come to anybody's assistance. Douglas MacArthur tried to do something, but he had a lot going against him there. It was a major difficulties down there to do anything. And there were some major heroics by the Americans and the Australians. Places like Guadalcanal and the Samoan Islands and New Guinea, and I mean, real heroics. And what's funny is that, well, I think it's funny, is that for my entire adult life, I couldn't for the life of me figure out why they needed a canal on that island. You know, Guadalcanal. What did they got a canal down there for? Why is it so important? Well, now I know it wasn't a canal. It was just a name place. And the black and white photos of that incident, just it really reeks of inhospitality and absolute horrors for the men who fought in that battle. So that's why the war in the Pacific became the war in the Pacific. Basically, because it appealed to the Japanese culture to move out aggressively and try to dominate the world. And they had in their mind as one of the more accessible places to get their commodities, oil, minerals, was in that neck of the woods, and they could get people from that neck of the woods. So the reason is essentially is because what the Japanese were desirous of and how it married well with their consciences, with their opinion of who they were and the allowable rules to get what they wanted, that they entertained. And there's no reason to believe that genetic buildup in those people isn't still in those people, and that they would revert to this if they could any day of the week. There's no reason to believe otherwise, you know. So I don't want to go on because then I'll get into a rant. So just leave it at that. The war in the Pacific became the war in the Pacific essentially because of people. Okay, people who let the Japanese get away with their advancing and crushing other nations, and because of the Japanese people themselves. People, that's the problem. You fix people, you're going to fix the world's problems. We need a specialty in our colleges and universities called people fixing. Okay, and I don't mean in the fields of psychology or psychiatry, because first of all, just to be in a way to offer some criticism, some satire. As soon as you get your degree in psychology, you now have a license not to touch people. You touch people, you'll get in trouble, you'll be sued, you'll be in jail. So don't do anything to the people. Let them come in and talk and write that, blah, blah. So anyway, it's a hard nut to crack, fixing people. So now we're going to get into music. If you go on Bluebird, the last thing I posted was Paul's theme, some original music by me. And Paul's my son's name. And when he was young, and even when he was older, he always loved Laura's theme from Dr. Zhivago, and he used to ask me to play it on the violin all the time. Yes, folks, I used to play the violin, but and I still believe that I could pick it up in a couple of weeks, have a reasonable mastery of the instrument, reasonable. But I don't pick it up anymore. I play the piano. That's what I do, and not very well either. But that's what I composed. I call it original music, and a theme should have a theme. So there's a little bit of a theme. I call it Paul's theme, original music by Joe Weinberg, and it's the last thing I put up there. It's about 12 minutes long. And you'll see the theme does run through the piece like it's supposed to in a composition of that sort. And there are probably sections of it that you might like. So if you do go up there, listen to Paul's theme. It's been the most hit of any postings that I've done. So that has me very glad that people are listening to Paul's theme. And on that note, I'll say goodbye for now. This has been a very long taping, and it's going to take me 2 nights to get it up there. Okay. Thank you. Have a wonderful time. If I don't talk to you, Happy New Year.